Afternoon, guys. So today we're on something a little bit easier. Definitely easier than a Mac SE30 anyway. We've got a Jaguar in from a customer, and basically they want a 50-60 Hz mod. So that's the mod we want to do. It's fairly simple, so there's nothing too technical. Evening. It's afternoon for us over here. Where are you located? It's 10 past 1 in the UK at the minute. We're just going to do basically install a switch on this as the key to it. Simple as that. You remove a resistor, you add a little switch, and you can toggle between 50 and 60 Hz. Now, the first thing we do before we do anything, though, is test that the consoles work before we touch them, because we need to know what state they're in. So this is the customer's Jag, but this is my controller, game, power supply, and AV cable. So all we need to do is test if the system itself works. This is normally what I tell the customers to do, just send in just the consoles. We barely need anything else. So if I pull up the HDMI over the top, and one thing with the Jags you might not know is if you remove the cartridge and try to power on, then nothing works because the power pins pass through the cartridge. So it's a way of preventing the console turning on or off. Just mute the phone a sec, and you would forget something. And obviously you can hear the Jag already. Oh, Australia, nice. So we've got the game loading up here, and obviously sound's working, game's working. We can have a quick test to make sure that the controller ports work. And then one interesting thing with these as well is, obviously, look at the controller for a start. Tons of buttons, so absolutely tons of buttons.
Good luck. What
typically happened on these, yeah, that's all functioning fine. And then sometimes, obviously, the games all have different uses of these buttons. So if we take a look at the screen here, this is where you could insert literally just cardboard prints that slot into little grooves. So there's little grooves on the side of the controllers down here. You can have like little overlays per game that used to come with them. Yeah, that's pretty much, that's the game. That's the Cybermorph. I think that's the one you're referring to. So to do the mod, we know it's all working. I've done a test. That's obviously not the test we normally do. I do a much more extensive test. I've played the console for half an hour before starting this, just to make sure we're happy that this is fully working. And then we also know what state the system's in before we boot. One other thing to see as well is, obviously the whole point of this is a 50-60 Hz mod. So if we turn on, and if I get the controller, and we can zoom in, and you can see on here on the OBS, well, you can if I don't zoom in too far, you see we've got 50 Hz here, so that's telling us the frequency that it's currently outputting. So that's what we want to alter. The customer wants to be able to switch to 60 Hz, which is, I don't know, it's just America, but Japan might. I think Japan have a mix of 50 and 60 Hz, whereas in the UK it was always 50. So it's currently set up in UK mode, and you can tell that because normally the UK Jags have a green LED, and the NTSC have a red. So that's normally, it's not always a guarantee because people shell swap and obviously console mod, but it's a good indicator that if you've got a green LED, it's a UK Jag to begin with. So we'll get into this first, which is just posi screwdrivers. And this has apparently been refurbished as well. So the customer said they purchased it about 1.5 years ago, and it's apparently already had a service. So what that means, like whether they've actually recapped it or not, we're not sure. Hey guys, everyone starting joining now. We're just doing an Atari Jaguar 50-60 Hz mod, so fairly easy mod, hopefully. It shouldn't take us too long. But yeah, this was meant to have been serviced already, so we're going to see and find out how serviced this really was. They did mention if it needs recapping or anything specifically needs doing, then to let them know. But they are on a little bit of a tight budget, so we don't want to do work we don't have to, but they also want to make sure this system is working good. And then if we lift up from the back, oh, we've got the, always forget these two screws here as well. Let me just go on the overview. I always forget them two hidden there. So you've got 4 on the outside, and then you have 2 on the cartridge connector and 2 at the front. There we go. And the 2 at the front are silver, and the 2 on the cartridge slot are smaller. So cartridge slots are like this. The front are like this, slightly smaller. And then the outer shell have a tapping tip on. So outer shell, cartridge, front. You can kind of tell from the size if you get mixed up as you're going. And then now it lifts out, and it basically lifts out up at the back and pulls out, so these cartridge ports pass through the shell here. So that's how we want to kind of do it. I need to move this camera slightly over as well on the vertical because we don't really see. There we go. It's a better position. So move the casing out of the way. We'll probably have to modify that to fit the switch in. And then this is the fun part. This is most of the 80s and 90s consoles covered in RF shielding. So we have to bend these all out and just unplug that. Atari Jag power supply, it's got a right hum going. So you want to bend all these tabs. I always use my tweezers and bend them, so let's get a bit more appropriate tool. We'll get this flat tool here. And then what we want to do is all these tabs, if you can get under them like that, you can then bend up. So under, bend up. And you can see, I think somebody's been in because there's a little scratch here. And go up there. Oh yeah, the overlays. I don't think I've really seen it on any other controller. And I never had a Jag as a kid. I actually brought, this is I think the first retro console I brought when I went Donington a few years ago as I was starting this business. And I just saw the console, brought it, played, I think it was Die Hard, I think was the first game I played on it. And then Doom. But they're really good consoles. The RGB output natively is really nice. Sales of Jag in the UK, I personally never even saw one as a kid, so I don't know if that's an indicator that they weren't that good or just I didn't have the money to buy one, but I literally never heard of these until I was an adult. But the fact that they're also more expensive now kind of hints at the fact that they were probably not sold as well, so there wasn't as many, hence the price then increases basically. Two tabs at the front, and I think I bet that tool's quite good. A little scooper. Yeah, that works quite good. Little scoopy end. And this is a steel cage because it's really firm. And then we've also got more twist tabs at the front now. So you just give them a gentle twist. And a lot of people just don't even put these cages back on a lot of consoles. They just remove them and leave them out, but obviously we return the consoles in the state they come in, so if they come in with cages, we'll keep the cages for the customer, unless they ask otherwise. And then if that's all good, we should get this cage off. And the first thing to see is if it's had any maintenance work done on it, because this was brought as a fully refurbished system. So let's just check for the customer if it really was refurbished. do look like recaps. Yeah, I think if they were done a while ago, though. I've got a few of my Jags, just haven't got them on me at the minute. I'm not 100% confident in the recap, to be honest. I don't think it's been recapped. We'll know from underneath. That's kind of the telltale sign. Or I could grab one of my Jags and we'd find out if they were recapped that way. Just get the bottom cage off as well. One thing to note on this bottom cage, catching on the cage a little bit, is that if you put this in upside down, I learned this the hard way. If we take this out, if you accidentally put this in this way, for example, which is very easy to do, and you don't think it's that important, this ends up shorting something on. Yeah, it doesn't look like it does, but I know for a fact it does. I think it's up here. I just know if you put this in backwards and then you put this in the cage, you short things out for sure. So whenever you're doing it, you make sure you either just remember that on this side is where you want the holes and think of the power rail here being protected, or you have writing normally on the top, but that has to go back in that way. So let's just check out these caps. Point to the RF shield. I believe it's one of those internet debates where everyone's got a different idea of why they were needed. I believe it was all about, obviously, radio emissions, and as people are making hardware and the frequencies increase, then you're going to naturally emit radiation, and like electromagnetic radiation that could interfere with other equipment of the time. So they didn't want a scenario where everybody released stuff and you had a load of radio emissions and interference. And back then they just covered everything in big metal shields to block anything so they could pass, standards of the time to be able to sell to the market. Now, I believe they weren't actually emitting anything of any concern. It was just more of an over-exaggeration and making sure they could pass. And obviously now we know a lot more about EMI, and we can test if you have, emissions on your circuit board. You still have to pass those tests, especially for things like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. But I think it was just an overall, everybody's cheap way of making sure it passed tests, just cover the whole console in a metal shield, basically. 60 Hz mod for Mega Drives, yeah, no different than doing these really. And the same goes with a lot of consoles. If you're going to do 50-60 Hz mods, make sure you're using RGB cables, or you need dual frequency oscillators. Otherwise, your chroma on the composite will be discolored, and I'll show you that when we've modded this. You'll see what happens if you do a 50-60 Hz mod and you don't change one of these two crystals. I can't remember which one it is. Then your video output here is going to be the wrong color because the chroma has to also match the frequency when it's composite. So stick with RGB ideally, and it's much easier. So let's take a look at how we do this. I've got a mod already. So in terms of a guide, so every time I do work on a system, I write a guide. So I've got a guide on retro6.wiki in Atari Jaguar and the 50-60 Hz mod here. So it's very simple, and this is why I like to write the guides as well, because the guides that I find mostly online when you're looking at doing mods, if you haven't done them before, they're not as clear, or they just tell you to say, remove this resistor and add a wire here, but they don't explain why. So whenever I do a guide, I try to reverse engineer where things go a little bit, look at the schematics, figure out why and what's happening, and then I make a note and say exactly why, like why we're removing stuff, what resistors are doing, what happens when you're grounding a signal, where does that end up going in terms of, joining to different chips on the board. So I'll not only just say where it goes, I'll show photos, I'll give prints of the schematic, show the resistors, just basically a more detailed guide so that if you want to understand what's going on and if you have problems, it's all explained. So if we glance over this, you can see pretty much at the top it says it's very easy. You remove R140, so it floats to 5 volts through this pull-up resistor, and then you ground that pin to get PAL, and you float it to get NTSC. So if you're used to doing mods, that's probably all you need to know, really. So you can get on and go, that's what I need to know. Like if I was doing a mod now and this was the guide, I'd read there and understand exactly what I need to do, and I could just crack on. So that's the idea. Here is also a screenshot from the actual schematic, the original schematic of the Jaguar, and you can see they've written 0 equals PAL, hence grounded as PAL, 1 is NTSC, and then you can see the other jumpers here. So you've got a jumper here for, I presume, RAM, the size of RAM, and they were unused, so they only really used what's labelled as B4 or R40, and on the back of some Jags, so it depends if this one is the same. Some of them are labelled, and you can see this is a newer revision where they removed all of the silk screen, so it doesn't tell us what's on the board. Hence why I've then labelled it on here and highlighted it, but if I pulled out one of the other earlier Jaguars, you'll see this has all writing on, so you can literally, it would say R140 right about this resistor. So we just need to identify that resistor on our board. And if we look, it will be, where are we? It will be this resistor here. So if we pull that up, you can see that resistor there. Let's just zoom in a little bit. And there you go. You can see that's the resistor we're looking at on the image there. So we've definitely got the right one there. And then if we carried on reading the guide, you basically remove that resistor, solder in a switch. So we've just got a picture of a switch, and this isn't the best position either. So I think I mentioned it on the guide, that if we install this in the position shown in the image, it's quite hard to get that into the console. So we probably want to try and find a better spot for that switch. But it shows the wire running all the way down, and we have it attached to U25, the bottom pin. So that's where we've attached it, and I believe that is because that pin just runs to the leg of that. So this resistor pulls U25, pin 11 to ground. So it's not removed and we can control that pin. So basically that's all we're doing. We could go to the resistor. We could literally solder a wire to this resistor if we wanted to. But that goes to the chip on the other side of the board down here. So we want to solder to the bottom pin of this U25. That's all that is. For recapping, telltale signs are pretty obvious. So unfortunately, it's one of those things that people scam a lot, where they'll just put, say, black dots on top of resistors and flow some solder on the pins of the legs to make it look like work's been done. One telltale sign is if the resistors match. If you work on them enough, if the capacitors rather match the known old capacitors, like I'm pretty sure these yellow ones were the originals, because when I recap them, those two are always yellow. And these are always brown, the big low profile. The one thing that throws you off on this particular board is they're naturally kind of a bit wonky and all over. So when we do them and we just install them, you normally just position them by hand and you're turning over and you're soldering and they end up in a random position like this. But I believe the Jag originally, this is how they looked anyway. They were quite all over the place. So to me, visually from the start, that looks like it's not been recapped. And the solder joints on them look fairly dry. So if we were to zoom in on these solder joints, you can see how they're a dull grey. And they're very even amounts, and there's not much solder. So say I go to solder this leg here, and I'm going to change this cap. If we get that there, and I just turn on the soldering iron, one, I'd use flux. So you're going to usually have some flux on the board, because humans, when they're reworking it, won't be as good as machines, and it won't go through an intensive clean process. So you normally have residue, which we don't have any of. So the first thing I'd do is I'll put some flux on, and we'll clean it a little bit, but you'll see there'll always be residue unless you clean them heavy. And then you're going to lift this cap out, you're going to kind of reflow, get some solder on, lift the leg out, solder it back in, and then let's say we clean it. And some people don't even clean, but let's say we do. You're going to be left with something like this. So you can now see it's not a well-formed ball, and that's partly because we're just not soldering it as good as machines and temperatures, and we're just reflowing. And you can improve that. So you could always like go back in and reflow and leave the heat on a bit more so the solder flows through. But we already have too much solder technically for a perfect joint. So unless you're ridiculously skilled at soldering, and you take far too much time in soldering these joints to make them look perfect, you're going to end up with joints that look like this. And you can see every other joint here looks completely standard and dry. So nice shine, dull joint. On the underside as well, if we look at where all these caps are, say, and flip over, we can take a look at the joints underneath. And you can see they just look factory. So they just all look like every other joint. There's no extra solder. And again, if we were going to recap this, obviously you'd have to remove the cap first, but then say we applied some solder onto here for the new cap, because you'd be soldering from this side, not the top, then the bottom would look similar to this. So you can see the bottom is easier to make look like the original, because it's naturally going to flow into the footprint. So the shape of the hole is going to naturally make it work. But still, if you were looking, it's hard to tell on camera, but that is shinier than that. So it doesn't, the shine on here isn't showing up great. But yeah, from experience and looking, you tend to find the biggest telltale sign is if the caps are literally known original caps. And I'm sure on the Jag, these were, the yellow ones were original. So we can even Google, in fact, perfect example right here. Here's my screenshot of a Jag I was working on that hadn't been recapped. And if you look, there's those two yellow caps, and they're all bent over. And there's the original brown cap. So this definitely hasn't been recapped, because this one I was working on, I haven't bothered recapping. It's my personal one, and it's used more for diagnostics. So this one definitely isn't recapped. So in terms of refurbishment, I don't think anything's been done. Like, it just looks like a stock Jag with the same amount of dust as I expect to see. So I think refurbished is just, they've sold it as a working console. I don't think there's been any refurbishment, which is a shame when the customer's paid for, I presume, a bit of a premium to have the refurbished side of things. So that just brings us to one other question then: does this need recapping? Small caps, you won't really get a bulge. Power caps, you would. So these power caps are probably bulge, and that's how you'd tell. These aren't bulging, so they're doing an okay job at the minute, but more of a concern is if they're leaking. So what we're looking for, if there's leakage, is these will go dull for a start, and they'll go duller than other joints, and you'll start seeing a bit of dark green. So I've just cleaned up a Mac SE30 which had leaking caps, so we could have seen. Let me see that little bit there. So I think that is the start of the electrolyte leaking out of this cap. So see that little bit of green there. So that one's slightly concerning, and that's the audio. Actually, no, I think that's the chroma circuit. So it's not even under that much load. This looks like a little bit of leakage as well. So the customer doesn't really want to have to pay for work that doesn't need doing. And yeah, that one. You'll normally find as well, they always leak out of the positive side of the cap first, is normally what happens. So if you watched yesterday on the live, we had a 12-volt cap going over the Mac SE, and on the left side, where the positive was, there was a lot of leakage coming out. So you'll normally find, it's not always true, but the positive legs are where you'll find leakage. This doesn't look terrible, but there are signs of, just minor signs that these are starting to leak. So they might want a recap, but I wouldn't say this is critical. Like, I don't think majorly critical. They're not too bad. And if the customer wants to save money, I'll advise that they just watch this video back. I'll send them the link when it's done and say that I've certainly seen worse. They're not terrible, but they are showing signs of age. So maybe if they want the recap done, we should do it. Hey, thanks for joining, Eddie. Just reading back on the chat. Morning, Jake. I think were you in yesterday's live as well? I'm surprised the bot hasn't told you off for long messages. Everyone kept getting told off for writing a long message the other day. DMs you can. I don't get much time, but yeah, you can DM me, you can email me. I'll reply when I get time. and you're welcome on all the guides. That's why I enjoy doing it, to see other people benefit from what we do. Oh yeah, I forgot to mute my phone. I just cancelled it. That looks like a scratch as well. Mute that in a minute. Well, still haven't muted it. I've cancelled it, but I'll just keep muting it. So what we're doing on this one is putting a 50-60 Hz mod on. Not that technical, so the work itself isn't going to be that hard. So we're kind of having a bit of a chill on this one, and more of a conversation than rushing the job. But we're just going to remove this resistor, which is R140. You can see this little red dot as well. See the little red dot underneath? That means this is glued down with assembly glue. So when you warm, you're going to have to give it a little bit of a nudge to break that assembly glue, and that's that little red there. We can keep that resistor out of the way, but we won't need it. Give that a little bit of a clean. And the main challenge on this one is literally going to be, as I mentioned, fitting a switch in somewhere that works good for us. So we need to run a wire from this pad here to a switch. So that's not that hard. So let's now try and figure out what we're going to do about this switch position. So we want to keep this intact, and this is what I didn't think about when I did the 50-60 Hz mod the last time, and I think it was just mine for the guide on the wiki anyway, so it's not the end of the world. But I did all the work, epoxied the switch in, and then realised when I put this cage back on, the cage is in the way of the switch. So if we put this back over a minute, just roughly, and we get this cage, I don't think we're going to have a way of getting out of doing some shell mods. We're going to have to put a little hole in the shell, but we need a way to install the switch. And another thing I did as well, notice how we have to install this. The front has to go in first, so those go through the port, and then the back is tight on here, going down. So the problem I had is I installed the switch here, and all this cage catches as you're pressing down. So I had to, I think I had to cut the shell, cut the metal cage, and it wasn't the best solution. So looking at it here, I think a better option is going to be here out the way. So we can put a little hole here. I've got loads of switches, but here's just a baby one I've got. And I'm thinking if we just nipped a hole through there, this would fit through and be a nice discrete switch just under here. So we could just about flick the switch. It doesn't look very... I don't know if that length is going to be enough. I think it will be. Yeah, it will be. So that'd be a good position there to slide the switch through. And then we can send wires in. We can install this, leave the top cage off maybe. I think it'd be the way. Can we get the top cage off while it's in position? Or will that catch on something? Yeah, so we can just about get that cage. It might be a little bit tricky, but we could have this all installed here. And then we could put the switch here, pass the wires through the cage, solder to here, and then put the cage on top. So I think that's where we're going to go for. We could even have it poking out the side. Would that work better? And then you can just get it there without having to lift the console up. So let's get the front shell. Glad you're liking the explanations. That's what I try to do, as well as, like I say, I don't like to do guides that just follow steps. Like, we're here to learn and understand why. Most people's curiosity is why they want to look at things as well. They're curious as to why things work. Yeah, so that one, I think it's going to be easier to pop out here with less shell mods than it is to try and pop out the side here. Just have a look around before we commit to this, because this is a choice once we've done it. Yeah, I think that's definitely the best spot. Plus, if this doesn't work well, it's in a position you're never going to see. So say we nick a little hole in there to fit this through. Yeah, that fits perfectly through that gap. All we've got to do is take out a tiny little piece of plastic in there. So I think that's where we're going to go for. So if we move all this out of the way a minute, and where we want to go for is one of these holes. So all we need to do is cut out a little bit of the plastic. No real specific position, but what I'll probably do is I'll just go by this circle. No real reason. I think the best way for this is just a Stanley knife. So just get a Stanley knife, and let me just get a fresh blade. Because if you get a fresh blade, we're just going to cut through this like butter. And I hopefully won't cut my fingers off either. So, get a brand new blade. There we go. And then this one will be nice and sharp. And this should be as simple as, so we're going to pick this one here. So let's just zoom in. And we just want to push through with the Stanley knife. And if we just push down, and you can see it's already cutting through nice and clean. And the goal is to try and make it look as factory as we can. There we go. So that's gone clean through there. Yeah, the plastic's quite soft. There we go. And the second one clipped off, and then we'll turn it around and try and just clean that slight edge because it's not very clean there. And that's it. So now if we look from the underside, you can see that's all we've done. So tell me that doesn't look discreet and almost factory. So all we've done is remove one rib. And now the plan's going to go to plan. We're going to have to slightly widen that hole. Wow, that's very discreet. So that is literally, the only thing is that's flush with that, but if you put your nail in, you can flick the switch. That's really discreet. I like it. Whether it's too discreet for the customer, I'm not sure. But that is literally very, very discreet in there. But it's a bit firm when we're pushing this through. There's just a little bit of firmness, so we're just going to have to slightly widen this out, or we've just got a little bit of plastic still catching. It's one or the other. There we go. So we just had a bit of plastic. No, it definitely is discreet. Hey David, thanks for joining in. We're just doing a Atari Jag 50-60 Hz mod. And the most challenging part is just hiding a button somewhere, hiding a switch. Just zoom out on this a little bit. There we go. And focus up, because I think we're slightly out of focus. Get a better angle. There we go. So that's a better visual. You can see the little switch in there. Now if I hold it in, the question is, can I switch this with my finger? If I can hold it in, that is. We're still just about catching. Like slightly. There you go, but that's a nice click. So that's going to work. I think I still just want to slightly shave that. It's so close to the exact size of the switch. We just want to make this nice and smooth. It doesn't want to be too firm. So let's just slightly shave. And this is where possibly just a file would be better, but I think it's just the tiniest bit of plastic. Because once this is in, I'm not doing too bad. I've got some nice food for tea, and I've got rid of the hard jobs. The Mac SE was quite a difficult repair, so these are nice and easy now. I've got quite a few decent jobs in front of me. There we go. Nice and simple. So that is clean, easy, and you don't even need a fingernail. You just need, like, I've cut my fingernails recently and I can still get in there. So that is mega discreet, which is what I like. So now we just need to secure that in. And this is one of the other problems I have. Securing things in. I always used to use epoxy, which I think I'm going to go back to. I went on to using Q-Bond, which is ultimately just super glue and a fancy baking soda. But the problem I've found with that is, especially with switches, Q-Bond runs into the switch and effectively glues the switch together. Oh yeah, Puggo's had about 10 treats this morning. He's going to go Costa with us later, or Starbucks, and get a Costa and some ginger biscuits as well. So probably as soon as I've done this, I'll take him out. Oh yeah, the sapphire shells are selling like crazy. We've got, I think we've got through half of them. They're a limited stock, and we don't plan to make them again because that's the whole point of having like limited stock. But I think we've sold through half already. And in fact, yeah, we've sold 2 yesterday. I've got them here. So they just need to be lens dropped, but we've got them sapphires and they've got the re-PCB in. Obviously all the mods in. But yeah, they're selling like crazy. I can't count how many of these we've done. So for this one, I think we'll do epoxy. If anyone has any preferences when they come to glue switches in, definitely let me know, because I still don't think I've found... I don't know, I think epoxy was my preferred perfect solution in a way to this, until I went on to Q-Bond, and then I can't tell you how many switches I've attempted to install with Q-Bond, where they look like they're perfect, and then as soon as I install them, and it sets, you realise you've glued the switch to itself. So I'm going to go back to epoxy. And have I got... Yeah, this one will do. So I went through tons of them. And that's one that works, Speed Epoxy, and the other's Z Epoxy. Both work. Thanks, I'm glad you're liking all the camera angles. It's a setup I've worked a lot on to try and make it so I can work without focusing too much on the cameras, but still have nice camera angles. So what we'll do for this epoxy, because I'm impatient, this is the main reason I do it this way. Epoxy, where have I dropped that now? Epoxy can take like half an hour or longer to set, and I definitely don't have that much time. So we get these 2 epoxies. And when they're down, there we go, we'll just squeeze an equal amount out. And you don't want too little, even though we're hardly going to use any. You want to make it mix good. And then with this, we should be able to zoom in a little bit on here. Let's get a little better angle. So we've got, move that slightly out of the way as well. We've got this here. Now, because I'm impatient, get your hot air gun, get this thing up to 400 degrees. Epoxy loves heat, it helps the chemical reaction. And this will be done in like 2 or 3 minutes. So you can see it going liquidous already. That will do. Doesn't need crazy amounts because that's 490 degrees. And now you mix the epoxy together. So instead of mixing cold and firm epoxy, just get it stonking hot with your hot air gun. And this will start tacking up in seconds. You're talking like a 1 minute epoxy now, which is perfect for me. And I just think I'm going to go back to this. This was always my method for securing most things. It never let me down. Hey Charles, thanks for joining in. Yeah, I just, at the minute I just go live randomly, there's no schedule. It's whenever fits in. So we had electrics off this morning. I was going to come on straight away. And then unexpectedly, we had some electric works being done. So we didn't even have power. So then I've just come on as soon as we've got power. Right, so this won't need much because it's a small switch. And there you can see this is already tacking up. So if I get plenty on the end, try to get this in camera for you, and scrape off, you can see that's already starting to set. It's not runny. So this is perfect. It's like workable now. We can tack it in place. And to be honest, I've just got 2 little tacks, and that's probably all we need, because it is just a tiny switch with no real force. We can always add more epoxy, we can always mix up another set of them in. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Maybe get a bit on this edge. So maybe just put a tiny bit this side. What we don't want is the epoxy running through the holes or being visible on the holes if we can help it. Which this side you're probably not going to be able to avoid, I don't think. I can try my best, but I think this epoxy will maybe be slightly visible. So if we look at that now, move that out of the way, you can see we've got epoxy just hiding between the 2 holes. We shouldn't see that. And then we've got a little bit of epoxy either side. If we keep it in place while it's not fully set, and we look underneath, you can see I can move the button left and right. I'm going to move it perfectly centered, just so those that have a bit of OCD aren't triggered by an imperfect switch position. So that's good there. So now we just sit and wait while that's curing. Probably give it, maybe, well, to be honest, we can start adding the wires and building this up, but probably take 5 minutes to fully cure to where I'm happy. We'll clean off the little spatula tool. You can also use a knife to get rid of any preset epoxy if there is any on, and clean the tool. It's the Stanley knife away, spatula tool away, put the epoxy away as well. Hey Mike, thanks for joining as well. We do seem to get quite a lot of people from all over, to be honest. We've got people from Australia in, Canada, US, UK. Yeah, the 60 hertz stuff, I think it's just, I think people who grew up on 60 hertz, it's better in some ways, and then 50 hertz, we grew up with in the UK. You don't really notice it as a kid, but I think the main thing people notice is if you play Sonic, that is definitely because the music wasn't time-based, it was literally frequency-based. If you play Sonic in the UK, it sounds as slow as anything if you're used to the 60 hertz. So if you tap between the 50 and 60 hertz on a Sonic game, that's where I think you mainly notice the difference. Weld 16 I've never used. Is that an epoxy? Or is it like a Q-bondy type thing? So I think the Q-bond's great for what it does. It's like instantaneous setting, but there's definitely the limits of the fact that it's basically super glue. So if you think of super glue running, you can't use it on. I've never once done a switch successfully with Q-bond because with the super glue ultimately just being runny, it just runs into the internals of the switches. Yeah, that's looking good. PS3s we don't work on. I just don't like them personally, and they're always failing with RSX issues, so we just simply don't work on PS3s, unfortunately. Yeah, I think the oh, there we go. The bot's telling you off for long messages now. I don't think 60 hertz ever looks any better. It's just literally some games will play faster depending on if they don't cater for the speed difference. So if they haven't coded the game to, you know, delay based on time, not just frames, then the game literally plays different. So now comes the only part we have to do on this. No 60 hertz won't make a difference in terms of anything but the video output, really. The only thing you might see is maybe some video noise, but obviously I believe when it was originally set in frequencies and we didn't really have filters on that, then they probably set it to 60 hertz to match frequencies of mains or to purposely not match frequencies of mains. I'm not sure why. It was all to do with the broadcasting specs, I remember reading up on it. probably a few years ago, but I forget the exact reasons. But it was obviously like broadcast televisions, why they set frequencies the way they did. Oh yeah, games will look better at faster frequencies, but in terms of 50 hertz and 60 hertz on a retro console, you're not going to see any difference. You could put we'll do a blind test on this after, and you can tell me what frequency it's running at, and you won't tell. Mind you, that won't work. The stream's 30 frames per second, but no, you won't notice a difference between 50 and 60 hertz in that manner, I don't believe. That's just the wire tacked onto the bottom of U25. No, I've got no education whatsoever. No high school education, no college education. Well, I'll say no college education. I did sports and science, or sports and nutrition science, something like that. And that was just because I was overweight as a kid and wanted to learn about food in terms of how to be healthy and how your body works and stuff. So I've got one thing, which is that, but no, nothing in high school, nothing later education, just all self-taught in everything. So I do software mainly, but this is my pleasure business. So software is self-taught as well, just like everything else. Right, let's position this up. Selling, you can ask on here, but there's not many people. If you join our Discord, discord.gg/retro6, then we've got a buy sell channel in there, and people will probably buy. Wire, yeah, this is got something in my throat. This is magnet wire, or enamel wire. This is, but it's normally called like Kino wire. Just got it off AliExpress, just nice and thin. Probably, well, I can measure it with a vernier, tell you exactly how thick it is, but I'd say about a 28 wire gauge. So let's see. It's 0.2, so 0.18 with enamel on, but inaccuracy of this is obviously slightly out. So I'd say that's probably 0.2 mil enamel coated wire. Oh yeah, the Vitas, we don't even work on the PSPs or Vitas now. They take up so much time, and we had to cut back on God, definitely got something in me through quite a few things recently just to keep up with the workload. We getting too many consoles in to be able to keep up, and then we couldn't keep customers happy because the lead times were something like 2 or 3 months at one point. It was crazy. Whereas now we're back to pretty standard, which is like a month lead time. No, this is a business, so we've got employees. It's all family now. We had like 16 employees a few years ago, but basically we had like a big boom, like everybody did during COVID. Had a lot of employees, but then things slowed down over the last few years, stabilized about a year ago, and we just reduced it down to pretty much family, so it's enjoyable. I don't want to be slaving away and this not become an enjoyable thing to do. Yeah, the power reg on the Jags blowing is fairly common. We used to sell the power reg chip The cap kits, you make sure you ideally get hours, but if not, you make sure that some of these caps are specifically low ESR. And if you don't put that in, the regulator won't work. So we've got the wire to this switch here, and now we just need a ground wire. So we've got the middle pin of the switch we can solder this wire to. And a ground we can tap off here. Well, let's just double check ground with the meter. So ground is everywhere, cages, that's kind of how you tell ground. So we've got a ground nice and close here, so we can run a wire from here, or we could even just solder to the cage, but I'm just going to run a wire from there. And then what will happen is when we flick the switch, we're sending this wire either to ground or disconnecting it, and it's just floating basically. So let's just get the other wire tinned, and I'll just tack it onto this ground here. Just go on this pad. And then to strip this enamelled wire, I just put solder on here, poke the wire into the solder, and then remove, and then that strips the end. Least favourite employee, it's no secret, it's the wife. Hate working with her. Doesn't listen, tells me what to do, tells me fuck off if she doesn't want to do a job. So yeah, worst employee is definitely the spouse. And to be honest, she might be sitting watching this in the kitchen, so I better be careful. Best employee is the wife. Listens to everything, makes drinks. We'll soon know she's listening because she'll come in and clown me around the head, I'm sure. That's the wire done. So let's check if the switch is set. If you want to check this, you just tap it with tweezers, and that's set enough for what we need to do. So it's a little bit soft. Uh-oh. I thought that was a message then. No, I think we're safe. I think she hasn't heard. Yeah, so that switch still works. So that's good. Yeah, for caps we try to overrate them as high as we can. So the voltage is higher and the more susceptible to lasting longer, but the physical size doesn't change if we can help it. And then one thing we don't want to forget to do is, yeah, I need a face cam to let you know. We need to pass it through here so we don't forget when we put the cage down, we're not crushing things. And there's the wire through. I always say she never listens to what I work on or what I'm doing, and then yesterday she said she was actually watching the live, so I was like, ooh, I better be careful. Alright, so for the switch, long wire, go to the middle. And now the choice here is, if we ground the switch, it's 50. And if we free it up so it goes to 60, it's where we think we want the switch going. So for me, do we want the switch being towards the front 50 and the back 60, or the other way around? Personally, I think I'd expect the front, and this is, I don't know why this logic works, but I'd say the front wants to be 50 and pushing it towards the back wants to be 60. Has anybody got any choice on that or preference, or you think why we do it one way or the other? And then we can solder this wire on either the top or the bottom to match. But personally, I feel like I'd expect the switch towards me, towards the front of the console. So like this way to be off in a sense, like, you know, stock, and then pushing it towards the back is on. Region switch, not as such, it's a frequency switch, which you could almost class as the region switch, because I think that's the only switch on this system. So it would be the only difference between the regions. So you could call it a region switch. I do use fume extraction. It's probably why I'm coughing at the minute because I haven't got it turned on. I just keep forgetting to turn it on there. I should really stick to it a bit more. It's definitely been getting me throat this morning, but I think that's just I've got a bit of a raw throat. Wires, to be honest, quite durable. I mean, if you want to see durable wire, go off topic a little bit, but check this wire out. So tell me you can even see that wire. So let's zoom in. So we know the other wire is 0.2 mil. So there's 0.2 mil wire. So a bit almost like human hair. Here's this wire. So even thinner, 0.05 mil. So you can fit 20 strands of this wire. So this is 20 times thinner than the 0.2. So how strong do you think this wire is? Let's see. Let's cut it and we'll do a test. You'd think this wire would be very flimsy. So let's solder it to the console. This is why you don't need thick wire. Can't even see it. There we go. So there's the thin wire. That's the console lifted. So in terms of strength, let's wrap this wire around so it's easier to grab. There's the wire. That's lifting the Jag off the ground at 0.5 mil. Like, that's crazy strong. Now that isn't normal wire. So this red wire is probably weaker, but this, if you want to get it, is, and I forget the name, but basically the stuff they use to heat up and use elements in light bulbs. I think it begins with M. I'll have to get the name for you guys, but this is what I use for trace repair. So it's crazy strong. So super thin wire normally snaps. I think it's, I can't remember. It begins with an M anyway, but that wire is crazy strong. So if we're going for the 50 to the front, that means we want to sync it to ground. So that means we want the wire on the front here, so it's shorted to ground at the front. Yeah, still broke. It's a 0.05 mil wire, and I lifted the console pretty much clean off the desk. But I think you'll agree that weight to thickness ratio, that's pretty impressive for super thin wire. I personally think this is like the perfect thickness, 0.2, unless you're doing anything with power. I think the 0.2 mil wire is like easy to see, hence why I buy red, and strong enough for most jobs. Like you won't really break this wire by accident. It's just whether you can carry the current you need to. And then now the wire's in, we could make it neater. Now we know where everything is. So probably line the wire up like this, and we'll resolder so it just is a bit neater. And then this wire, you can just, because it's normal wire, not crazy strong wire, you can just wiggle a few times. And now that looks a bit neater, straight lining up. This one will do similar. It will come over, pick a point, go down. And we're going all the way down, so I think we'll go right the way down to here. And then probably across. And then if you wanted to get really clean about it, you can use the UV curing resin to tack things in. So this is what I normally do when I work away. I'll get them close to where we want them, like this. Put a tiny blob of the UV curing stuff in, and then I'm going to have to let go of that and like fling up, so I need to go grab the torch. And then we push that back down to where we want it, like that. Get the UV light on and cure. That's now in position there. So then we can pull this down to where we want, like so. And we'll just do the same thing again here. And this is easy to pull away from the board, but looks nice and clean with not much visual getting in the way. That's the one, Molly Denim, however you pronounce that. That's the wire. And I just brought it because I wanted really thin wire when I'm doing like BGA repairs or traces inside boards. But I was finding the really thin wire I'd got, which I think I binged yesterday, silver wire, snaps crazy easy. Whereas that wire, I could not believe how strong it was. It was crazy. Yeah, resin on there, that doesn't matter. But I suppose it depends how thingy you are about the visuals of it. Like, I like it to just be neat enough, but I don't want to spend too much time going over the visuals, because obviously time is money, and it depends how much the customer wants to pay you for your time versus the thing actually working. Whereas this is a nice simple mod, so we can spend the extra time on making the job nice and neat. But you can always go further and further. You can keep improving all the time to make your jobs cleaner. It's there. Oh, is that not set yet? There, it doesn't quite set. Yeah, that's not really coated, that actually. Needs a little bit more. It's way too much. Good job, it's clear. Let's clean that a little bit up. But Kapton tape, personally, I just think it looks uglier. I like the discreet, clear visual where you can't really tell what's there. But yeah, and also I find Kapton tape doesn't stick. Like Zach says, it sticks loads. I personally don't think Kapton tape sticks very well at all. So it's just more personal preference than anything. And on this now, we can put a bend on. Got it there. And resolder this on. The worst is when you do all this and then realise you've soldered something to the wrong place, and then you've glued everything in, and you have to do it all again. I'm just going to do this little blob under the scope so I can actually see what I'm doing there. And I think that's neat enough and in place. So I might do new photos for the wiki as well. So let's try and zoom out so you can see the whole thing, but see what you think of that. I don't think that's too bad at all. So we've got a switch here, epoxied in, that you can't really see on the other side. That's nice and centered. Comes around, that one goes straight down to ground. This one goes across, down, over. So overall then, when you're looking at that, I don't think that's too bad at all. Epoxy or glue to remove. It really isn't hard to get off, so I can show you why I use this stuff. It's not bad at all. Definitely not epoxy, but UV resin, there's nothing wrong with resin. So we just take a cut of this, plonk it on the chip, plonk it on the circuit board if we want, but so you put plenty on, and cure. Get a little something on my finger as well. So that's all cured. You can see it's rock solid as well. And then, oh no, it's not good. And you'll just find comes off like that. So it's not hard to remove. And leave no residue, no marks, no damage. And that's just because it basically just cures as a nice hard piece. And you can easily use chemicals as well. If you're on like circuit boards, you don't want to scrape and scratch things. You can just use IPA and heat. I'll remove this without anything. So if we put heat over this and then lift off, it's just going to lift off. It'll take some heat, so it's obviously still good for while you're working. But no, it's not hard at all to remove. It's like the perfect amount of, I think, fixture. So it's not going to pull off when you're just touching and moving around. It keeps everything secure, but you can easily remove it without any damage or any struggle. Thanks, glad you're liking the work. I think we're basically done on this one now, but for testing. So we've got the switch on. That's all cured now. That's in. So before we build up, then we can power up. You're really not liking that resistor, are you? It'll come off that resistor fine, don't worry. Might have to just take it off the resistor for you, just so you're not bothered by it. Where is the HDMI? Over here. Digital microscope. This is just, I've got a load, but I think this one is Amscope. So this body has been changed. This is an RF4 body, but they're all similar. So I've got a base from one microscope, the head holder from another, and this from here. But you can use all of one kind. Amscope stereo microscopes. The only thing I'd say is, let me just bring this up so you can see. Make sure you get ones where, see these two stick outs here? Those are the ones you want, so you can see. If I can, oh no, it's actually the same now. I was going to say, I've got ones where these fix straight to the heads and they just swivel on it, so they still move, but you don't get this like extra piece here, so the eye gap isn't as far. And I find them ridiculously hard to see through. So just make sure you get the ones that look similar to this. But Amscope are great, and they come with everything. They come with WF. It's a WF 10x20. So it's all the most standard setup now, and you can get them for £200 to £300. Coffee or tea? I drink both. So I've just had a tea and I've got a coffee here. I drink everything: black coffee, white coffee, English tea, Chinese tea, black tea, white tea, green tea. I drink pretty much everything. I drink tons of coffee though. Absolutely tons. Power. Let's pull up the HDMI and let's see if we still work. There we go, and you can see in the top corner, well, you could until it's disappeared, where it's 60 Hertz. So either the switch is in, yeah, the switch is at the back, so that's good. Yeah, so you see 60 Hertz now at the top left then. If I flick the switch, so if we go back to this view, and we flick the switch from underneath, Do we change the frequency on the fly? We don't, so we have to power cycle by the looks of it. It's either that or our mod won't work. Oh, I turn the console off. It's not a reset button, is it? There we go, and that's 50 Hertz. So if we show this on screen, if I turn off, if you look at the top left, turn on, and then you should see 50 Hertz stick up at the top there. Then if I flick the switch to the back of the system, turn on again, we see 60 Hertz. That's now working fully. The question is, can we actually flick this switch with our finger? Yeah, nice and easy. So that's flicked forward, that's flicked back. I think that's perfect. Like, personally, I think that's perfect. It's in one way, the flat's good because you can't accidentally change it, and then all you've got to do is just put a little bit of finger in and switch it forward or switch it back. So I think that's just enough. It's a little bit, I don't know. Yeah, it's easy enough. Could maybe do with a switch next time that's like 0.5 millimeter thicker, so it just catches, and you could flick it with, you know, nothing. But it's certainly not hard to change. I don't think it liked me flicking that switch either while it was on, going on and off and on and off. But yeah, that's all working and done. And we're going to have no issue now with closing this up because, obviously, zoom out, you can see, well, you know what we've done. But this goes through the cage there, so the other cage sitting over the top is no problem at all. This is Cybermorph, what we've got in at the minute. Yeah, BBC Micros, I've got one of them myself. Still need to do it up. It works, but it looks crazy bad. It's not in good shape visually. And then we can also, one thing we sell, where have I put it? Put that over so you can see what's going on in a minute.
Good luck.
Ah, there. Put it on the side. Oh, it's definitely Pug and Costa now. I'm not even going to bother putting the lid on this thing because I want to get going before the traffic. One thing we sell is the Jag game drives. This is by a guy in the UK, Retro HQ. You can go on their site and other people sell it, but we sell it and we deal with them personally as well. This you can load up and it will load every game that you want to, really. So you can load this up with any Jag ROMs you've got and load them all off. And you can see this comes up as well. This is a good check where it's telling you the cartridge port's a bit dirty because the Jag game drive does a full test of all of the data and address pins, whereas some games won't test all of the cartridge pins. Obviously, they'll only use the data and address they need to. So it's also a good way to diagnose faults on a system sometime. And there you go. There's all my legally obtained ROMs, so you can play any games you like on there. Oh yeah, the Spectrums. I've got a Spectrum, and I think I brought it. It was a 48K, the rubber key one. I think it's 48K. I've got every Spectrum, but the first one I brought was the rubber one. It was working. We demoed it when I had a physical store. Left it running, and it just burnt out within like a day. Just running for like, I think it was 6-7 hours a day. They definitely don't like to be just run constant. They generate too much heat. So I've still got to fix that up. I never bothered fixing it. I just put it in a box and never used it again, to be honest. So that's that one done. I probably won't be back on today because I'm going to take the Pug out, and then I've got those short ribs. So I cooked some short ribs yesterday that look absolutely amazing. So I'm waiting on them. So there's the ribs I cooked through the night, and this is this morning. So they've been sitting holding in the oven. So I'm going to be having them tonight. And then tomorrow we'll probably work on, I've got so many things here. Let's have a look. I'll probably work on this next, because this has been here a short while. Neo Geo AES. Normally when I start working on these and people see them, I just get one after the other after the other. Let's have a look what this needs doing. diagnostic so broken, and then did like further work if we fix it. So this one will be a repair. So I'll probably jump on that next. More than likely tomorrow though. But I'm sure we'll get these working. I've worked on so many of these. Shouldn't be too much of a problem. So yeah, nice easy bit of work for once instead of a complicated Mac SE30s. So I'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for all joining in, and I'll catch you tomorrow.